Hi Westinghouse students, it's Miss Kramer talking about how to write about poetry. This is really an active lesson, so as you're listening, you should have a pen in your hand and you should have pages 25 through 27 open and ready to read along with me. If you don't have that ready right now, please pause the video and take those materials out. I want to start by reminding you of what your final assessment will be. It's two parts. We have the Step from Heaven vignette, which we'll do before finals. So that's a creative short story about yourself using the photo that you brought into class. The second part of the portfolio is the poetry analysis. It's the cold prompt that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. I'm going to give you a poem, one that you've seen at some point in class. Could be a poem that I've introduced to you at any point in time. And you're going to write 3 paragraphs about that poem. You'll write an SAT introduction, a Melcon paragraph that contains 3 pieces of evidence, and a stack or conclusion paragraph. Today, we're going to briefly discuss these 2 things. I want you to keep in mind that the SAT introduction method is something that's taken from AP Literature. So it's a challenging way to write, and I'm hoping that it will not only give you a good format for writing about poetry now, but will also help you to write about poetry when you read it your sophomore year, your junior year, and your senior year here at Westinghouse. So we're going to start on page 25 in your Unit 2 poetry packet. If you don't have that out, like I said, take a minute, pause the video, and take that out. The lesson starts with a Shakespeare sonnet, Sonnet 73, and it uses Sonnet 73 as an example. So I'm going to read the poem 2 times, as I always ask you to do, aloud and with feeling. If you're watching this video multiple times, you can skip through me reading this video. If this is the first time you've watched the video, then you should read along with me. Sonnet 73. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that seals up in all the rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceiv'st, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. I'm going to read it one more time. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that seals up all the rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. So, follow along with me as I read and mark the text, and you want to mark the text in the way that I'm marking it. So it says, writing a poetry analysis. Writing a literary or poetic analysis is a bit different than writing an argumentative or persuasive piece. For an argumentative piece, your goal is to argue your point using ethos, logos, or limited pathos. These are called rhetorical devices. However, in a literary analysis, your goal is to demonstrate to the reader how all of the working parts of a piece of literature fit together to showcase a theme. Sure, you're still creating an argument for your view, but it uses different proof. In an argumentative piece, you might use stats, facts, or reliable quotes from a myriad of sources. In a literary analysis, your evidence comes from the piece itself. So I'm going to circle that and say, do not need outside sources. So you can already see how this is different from the writing that we did at the beginning of the year, where you had several articles that you brought together to write an argument. The only evidence that you'll need for this kind of writing is the poem itself, and so that makes it easier in that sense. It says, based on the above paragraph, list two differences in writing an argumentative piece versus literary analysis. So I'd like you to pause the video right now and fill those in using this paragraph here. The paragraph tells you what is the difference between a literary analysis and an argumentative essay. So reread the paragraph if you need to, pause the video, and fill in this field. Meanwhile, I'm going to move on to the rest of the lesson. So at the bottom of the page it says, in a literary analysis, which includes writing about poetry, you'll demonstrate your, change the page here, understanding of literary devices and figurative language. Like, what's figurative language? Metaphor, alliteration. A lot of those terms we've talked about in class over the last few weeks. So it says, you'll use your understanding of literary devices and figurative language by weaving your understanding and analysis of the theme of the work through the lens of literary terms. Just as a reminder, we've covered what a theme is. So in this box, you want to pause the video first and write again what the definition of a theme is. I'm going to move on. It says, let me show you some examples of an introduction paragraph to help you get started. So these are the types of introduction paragraphs you're going to be writing. So you really want to focus in on what this lesson is about to tell you. An introduction paragraph for an argumentative piece at GWCP contains an attention getter, a connection, and a thesis that sometimes has supports. So we call that an ACTS paragraph. That should look familiar to everyone who's a freshman. An introduction paragraph for a literary analysis is going to be different, and it's much more simple and fluid. So this, you are not writing an ACTS. It does not equal ACTS. You are not writing an ACTS for this type of paper. Instead, you're going to follow this formula: subject, assertion, and theme. And it says, don't worry, we'll unpack these words. So we're going to start with subject. The subject is the abstract concept you're talking about. An example might be love or friendship. Think of abstract like this. Can you touch it? Well, that's not abstract. You can't touch love, right? You can show someone that you love them by hugging them, but that's not what love is. In class, we didn't use this word abstract. We instead use the word intangible. If something is tangible, it means you can touch it. If it's intangible, you can't touch it. So love and friendship, these are intangible concepts. We also said that the flag is a tangible symbol of, what did we say? Freedom. Democracy. These are intangible or abstract concepts. So right now you want to read through this prompt and pause the video so that you can fill it in. It says, show me you understand abstract. List two ideas or concepts that you can't touch here. So don't do freedom or democracy or love or friendship. Try to think of two abstract or intangible ideas that we haven't mentioned and fill in that field. So we've talked about the subject. It's that abstract or intangible concept like friendship, love, freedom, democracy. The assertion, that's the next part. So we have S and A, is your interpretation, the conclusion that you draw about that abstract concept. Okay, so this is where you get to have your idea about the poem. And the theme is the simple message that the author wants to convey about the human condition. So that actually answers the question to number 2. Number 4. So if your abstract concept is beauty, you can't touch beauty, and everyone's idea of beauty should be somewhat different. Tell me, what is beauty to you? So you can pause the video and please fill in the answer to that. Number 5, beauty is an abstract concept. An author might be trying to prove in his or her poem that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What does that mean? So this would be a theme that you might state in your introduction, subject, assertion, theme. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That is a theme that has this abstract concept of beauty. What does that mean? Go ahead and fill in, pause the video and fill in what that means. I'm going to keep moving on. It says, here's an example where an abstract concept is given. See if you can identify the abstract concept by underlining or highlighting it. So this right here is an example of a subject, assertion, and theme introduction. It says, in Sonnet 73, now we're referring back to the poem that we read at the beginning of the lesson, the narrator discusses his concerns with aging. Read his sonnet carefully, then write an essay that discusses how he feels, analyzing the poetic techniques he uses to explore this particular situation. So this is an SAT prompt. It's a question. What is the abstract concept that they ask about in this prompt? Abstract concepts like beauty, independence, freedom, democracy. What is it that cannot be touched? Please highlight or underline that abstract concept now. Moving on. So now you have to create an introduction paragraph answering this prompt. Your intro might look like this. Here's a sample introduction. SAT intro. In Sonnet 73, the narrator doesn't seem concerned with aging, as he knows that it increases his lover's fondness for him. His use of natural metaphors and imagery point the reader toward Shakespeare's theme of time waits for no man. Go back to the sample thesis and underline the subject, highlight the assertion, and box the theme. So I want you to pause and try this on your own. I am going to do it as well. So first I want to underline the subject. I'm looking for that abstract or intangible concept. Here it is aging. People getting older isn't something we can touch. We all get older. We can't really touch that idea. Somebody might look old and have a wrinkly face. We can touch a wrinkly face, but we can't touch the concept of aging. The assertion is the claim that you're making, and usually that claim contains some reference to the author's choices in language. So you're making a claim about what the author did to prove a point. So in this case, the assertion, and I'm going to put a box around it because I don't have a highlighter, is this: his use of natural metaphors and imagery.